She said it with a mouthful of sharp words and an empty heart. It was my grandfather's birthday, and the house was packed. Everyone gathered in the dining room, laughing, eating, pretending we were a close family. And then, out of nowhere, my mother blurted out, "You are a dead weight in this family." There was immediate silence. The laughter stopped. The eyes fell on me like knives. I froze. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't understand what I had done to deserve hearing this, and from the very mouth of the woman who gave me life, the table became a courtroom. Everyone was watching. No one was defending me. I felt naked, weak, small, as if I no longer had a place in this world. And just when I thought nothing worse could happen, a scream tore through the air from the next room. Share this story to reach further. Subscribe to the channel, share this video on WhatsApp, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. The scream was desperate, loud, and heartbreaking. Everyone rushed into the living room. My grandmother was on the floor, trembling, her eyes rolled back. The glass she was holding had fallen and broken. My uncle called 911 while my father pulled her aside. But my mother? My mother didn't even move. She stood there staring at me, as if my grandmother's outburst had no significance, as if what she'd said was still echoing louder. Someone pulled me by the arm and told me to get water, but I could barely walk. My eyes were still burning. My hands were sweating cold. The weight of her words hit me harder than the shock of Grandma's attack. I wondered, for the first time seriously, if I really was a mistake in that house, if I really was a problem, a burden. But deep down, something inside me was beginning to ignite. A silent anger, a weariness built up over years. That sentence didn't come out of nowhere. It was the accumulation of looks, of contempt, of rejections disguised as politeness. That was just the first explosion. And even with the confusion in the room, I knew right then and there, nothing would be the same after that night. After the ambulance took my grandmother away, the atmosphere in the house grew tense. Everyone pretended to be normal, but no one made eye contact. I went upstairs to my room, locked in, listening to the hurried footsteps downstairs, waiting for someone to come up, for someone to knock on the door. But no one came. No, sorry. No, I exaggerated. The silence was worse than the scream, worse even than my mother's words. It was pure abandonment. I lay on my side and stared at the wall for hours. Her words hammered in my mind like an endless echo. Dead weight. It seeped into my skin. I saw myself as a child again, trying to show her drawings she never looked at. I saw myself as a teenager trying to tell her about accomplishments she never listened to. Now an adult, I realized. I'd always been invisible, and when I wasn't, I was a nuisance. Downstairs, the family feigned normalcy, as if they hadn't witnessed an emotional lynching, as if my existence wasn't significant enough to cause outrage. My father, as always, remained silent. My brothers laughed. Their lives went on, and there I was, locked away, alone, wondering why love always seemed like a distant prize within that house. I opened my journal. Yes, journal, because writing was the only way I could feel heard. I wrote everything down, word for word, how she said it, how others reacted, how I felt, and then I wrote a sentence that changed everything. I'm leaving. For the first time, I considered leaving. For real. No threats, no scene, just leaving. Because staying was already unbearable, and I didn't owe anyone an explanation. But before making any decisions, I needed to understand where all this contempt was coming from. My mother had always been tough, but this was cruel, cold, surgical, and no one attacks with such precision without a reason. So I started investigating. Old letters, saved photos, files forgotten in the back of drawers. And that's when I found something that made no sense at all. A torn document, poorly hidden, with my name on it. But the date of birth was wrong, and the last name, different. My eyes widened. My fingers froze. My heart pounded as if it knew before my mind. That paper was the tip of a secret, and deep down, I already knew. I wasn't just the dead weight in the house. I was the piece that never fit into their puzzle. The sheet was yellowed, folded 4 times, and hidden inside a folder of medical documents. I found it by chance while searching through old photos, trying to feel some real connection to that house. When I unfolded the paper, the first thing that struck me was the name, Daniel Moore, my name. But the surname wasn't the same as my mother's or my father's. It was different, strange, unknown. The birth date was also wrong. a year earlier than I'd always been told. I stared at it for minutes, trying to rationalize. Could it be another Daniel? A cousin? A typo? But everything matched. My middle name, the city, even the hospital. The only thing that didn't fit was the story I'd been told, and that opened a hole I could no longer ignore. I walked downstairs with the paper in my hands. My mother was in the kitchen, making coffee, as if nothing had happened days before. "What's this?" I asked bluntly. She looked at it, froze, and tried to laugh. "Oh, this? It must be from another patient. We keep so much old stuff," but her voice gave it away. It trembled. She avoided my gaze. It was a lie, and it was the worst one she'd ever told, because she tried to erase my identity. "You knew this all along?" I persisted. She didn't answer. She just grabbed the dish towel and pretended to dry the same cup for minutes, and it was in that silence that confirmation came. Not from her mouth, but from her cowardice. The lie didn't need words to exist. The fear of facing it was enough. The effort to hide it was enough. I went upstairs again, locked away, with a new feeling burning inside. Brought. I turned on the computer. I started searching for birth records under the document's name. Daniel Moore, Tulsa, Oklahoma, a hospital called Mercy West. And it didn't take long until I found, adopted at 6 months of age, biological mother, Hannah Moore, father, not registered. My world spun. It wasn't just old paper. It was a truth that had been ripped from me since birth. There, in front of the screen, I was sure, they hid everything from me. It wasn't just rejection, it was complete erasure. I wasn't just invisible in that house. I was an intruder, a secret, a burden that was never accepted, because I was never really theirs. And now, with my heart in ruins and my soul in flames, a decision began to take shape. I spent the night awake. The name Hannah Moore wouldn't leave my head. Who was this woman? Why did she turn me in? Was she alive? Had she sought me out? Or had she forgotten me, the way they taught me to forget myself? With my mind reeling and my heart heavy, I opened a new tab and typed, Hannah Moore plus Tulsa. The first searches were vague, but then a photo appeared. Her. It was a woman with deep-set eyes, a sweet smile, and a look familiar. I saw myself there. It was impossible to deny it. There were traces of her on my face, on my forehead, in my eyes. The caption read, Hannah Moore, founder of Second Chance Families. My eyes widened. The woman who had given me up for adoption was now helping children in similar situations. The irony hit me like a punch to the gut. I went to the NGO's website. There was a contact form, a hotline, a section. Have you been adopted, and are you searching for your origins? My hands were sweating. My heart was pounding. I took a deep breath, wrote a short, direct text, and hit send. They were the longest seconds of my life, and when I finished, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, with a single certainty: I would go all the way. 2 days later, I received an email. It was from her, direct, calm, almost as if she'd already known this day would come. Daniel, if it's really you, I've waited for this moment for 20 years. I read the message 10 times, crying, trembling, because even if it didn't explain everything, the mere fact that she'd waited changed everything. For the first time, someone was waiting for me. In the email, she left me her number. She said I could call whenever I wanted, but if I didn't want to, she would understand. This broke me even further, because she didn't ask, she didn't demand. She just offered me a space, a place where I could exist without being a burden, without being ashamed, without being an obligation. For the first time, I was alone, desired. I stared at the screen with the saved number. I didn't have the courage to press the green button, but I already knew. My life couldn't continue in the dark, and the answer I'd been searching for was there, just a phone call away. Even though I was shaking, even though I was afraid, I knew I needed to hear the voice of the woman who brought me into this world. I waited until nightfall. I grabbed my phone, locked myself in the bathroom, and stared at the number, heart racing, palms sweating. I pressed the call button. The ringing seemed to last forever. When she answered, she simply said, "Hello?" And in that single word, there was something that dismantled me. I recognized the voice, not because I'd heard it before, but because my body recognized it. It was hers. It was real. "Hannah?" I asked, my voice breaking. Silence for a few seconds. And then, "Daniel?" It was as if time stood still. She cried. I cried. And neither of us knew what to say. It wasn't like the movies. There was no script. Just raw, confused, raw emotion. But even without knowing how, we sat there for hours, talking about everything, about nothing, about what was left of us after 20 years. She told me what happened. She was only 17 when she got pregnant. Her parents forced her to give up the baby. She said she tried to back out, but when she finally found the courage, I was already with another family, and they told me it was better this way, that I would confuse you. Her voice carried guilt and pain, but also a kind of hope that survived the test of time. She never gave up on me. She was just silenced. I told her everything I'd experienced, without embellishment, the lack of affection, the harsh words, the humiliation, the phrase dead weight on the family. She fell silent and then whispered, "Forgive me." It was the first time anyone in that world had asked me for forgiveness, and something inside me broke, but not destructively. It was like a dam breaking. It hurt, but it cleansed. It freed me. She asked me out. She said she lived just a few hours away, that if I wanted, I could come see her. She didn't pressure me. She didn't demand anything. She simply offered what no one had offered me before, the chance to be truly seen. And there, even without knowing what would come next, I said yes. I needed to see the face of the woman who gave me life, and who now perhaps wanted to give it back. The next morning, I packed my bag. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't leave a note. I just left. Because sometimes running away isn't cowardice, it's survival. And on that road that led to Hannah, the Daniel who left home wasn't the same Daniel who would return, if he returned. Because finding the truth isn't just about the past. It's about rebuild the future with your own hands. I arrived in town late in the afternoon. The orange sky gave the moment an almost cinematic tone. The GPS indicated, "You have reached your destination." It was a simple house with a front garden and white curtains in the windows. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my neck. I parked, took a deep breath, got out of the car, and walked to the door. Before I could ring the bell, it opened. As if it knew it was me, there she was, Hannah. Older than in the photo, but with the same look. That look that, even without words, said, "I know you." We stood there, staring at each other. We didn't know what to do, until she smiled. A shy, uncertain smile, but full of love. And then she hugged me. Not a polite hug, but one that says, "You've come home." I cried like a child. So did she. We walked in. The house was small but full of life. Pictures on the walls, books, plants. The smell of baking cake hung in the air. "I made your favorite, or what I think it would be, if I had known you." We laughed. And there, in that silly sentence, I felt a warmth in my chest that I had never felt before. That woman, a stranger, knew more about me in seconds than my entire family had known in years. We talked for hours, about everything, about lost time, about how life took us down different paths, and about how somehow we found each other again. She told me she'd never had any other children, because none of them would be you. I could hardly believe that love still existed, intact, waiting for me. It wasn't guilt. It was bonding. It was motherhood. Before she left, she gave me a box. Inside were letters written to me over the years, one each year. Birthdays, Christmases, imagined milestones. It was the life she wanted to have with me, but was prevented from doing so. I read the first one right there, the one from when I was 2 years old. It ended with, "One day, you'll understand that you were never a burden. You were always my miracle." I got back into the car with a different soul, light, touched, and with a certainty I'd never had before. I was loved, and no matter how much they tried to erase me, the truth found a way to blossom. I was ready to face whatever came, because now I knew my origins, and no one else could tell me who I was. Returning home after that encounter felt like a step backward, but I knew I had to face it. It was like closing a cycle, or maybe opening a new one with the truth in my hands. When I walked in the door, my mother was sitting on the couch, as if she'd been waiting for me. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. Her gaze was empty, dry, the same as always. But now, I was different. He wasn't the same boy begging for crumbs of love. I placed the box of letters on the table. I was with my real mother. She didn't answer. She feigned disinterest, but her hand gripped the arm of the chair tightly. She waited for me for 20 years, and you hid me from her. Still nothing. Silence. Until finally she said, "She gave you away. I saved you." It came like venom. "You saved me from what? From being loved?" I didn't scream, but each word cut deep. My father appeared at the door listening to everything. He tried to intervene. "That's enough," but I raised my voice. No, not now. Now it begins. I told them everything. The certificate, the phone call, the trip, the letters, the whole truth right there in front of them. My mother tried to remain calm, but her eyes began to well up. For the first time, she couldn't deny it. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to face it. You called me dead weight, but the only thing that kept me alive was knowing there was still something outside this house. They were silent. My father, head down. My mother, hard as stone, but visibly broken inside. And me, I felt light, because the pain had already been spoken. It had already been heard. And now, it was their problem to carry it, not mine anymore. I went upstairs, closed the door, and leaned my back against it. Tears flowed effortlessly, not of sadness, but of release. I no longer needed to pretend this place was home, or that these people were all I had, because now I knew that true love exists, and that you don't shout it in front of others as punishment. It proves itself in silence, in care, in truth. I lay down with the box of letters beside me. I picked up another one. Year 5. The handwriting was firm, and the end read, "If you're sad today, know that somewhere there's someone who never forgot you." I slept with that phrase on my chest, because now I had a name, a story, a memory, and a presence. And no one could steal that from me anymore. The following week, the truth didn't just stay between us. A cousin found out, then an aunt. Within days, the whole family knew. Messages began arriving, some supportive, others invasive, full of judgment. "Why did you expose all this? Your mother raised you. Are you going to throw this away for a woman who left you?" It was as if being grateful meant accepting any pain in silence. But I wasn't born to be complicit in lies. My mother became more reclusive. She avoided family lunches. She didn't respond to messages. I watched her from afar, trying to understand if she felt regret or just anger at having lost control. My father, little by little, began to treat me differently, no longer as a son who needed fixing, but as someone he respected, perhaps too late. But still, something changed. Hannah called me every day, sometimes just to see if I'd eaten, sometimes just to hear my voice. We began to build something real, unhurried, guilt-free. I told her childhood stories, and she told me the dreams she'd had for me. It was strange, as if we were living 20 years condensed into tiny connections, but it was sincere. It was present. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged. One day, I posted an old photo of her on my profile. I just wrote, "It took a while, but I found it." The post exploded. Comments, shares, messages from strangers saying they were going through something similar. I realized my story wasn't just mine. It echoed the stories of many sons and daughters who grew up without knowing where they came from, without feeling worthy. And now, this story could heal more than just me. My mother saw the post. She didn't comment. She didn't like it. But that same night, she left me a note on the table. "I hope she gives you everything I couldn't." I read it 3 times. I didn't know if it was regret, resignation, or just an emotional goodbye, but I understood. That relationship was over. Not with anger, not with scandal, but like everything between us, in silence, without truth, without a hug. I respected her, but I also respected myself, because it was no longer my place to carry guilt that wasn't mine. My journey was now different, and it began every day with a new letter, a new conversation with Hannah, a new piece of me being rebuilt. And with each piece that fell into place, the pain of the past gave way to a certainty. I've always been worthy of love. It just took them a while to tell me. After reading all the letters Hannah wrote to me, something clicked. I felt I needed to give them back. Rewrite my story, not just for her, but for myself as well. I grabbed a notebook and began. I wrote as if I were Daniel at every age, one by one. 6-year-old Daniel, who hid in the bathroom when the house screamed. 10-year-old Daniel who pretended it didn't hurt. 15-year-old Daniel, who just wanted to disappear. Each page I wrote was a wound opening and healing at the same time. I told everything. The nights I cried without understanding why. The words I never heard. The times I kept quiet out of fear. But I also spoke of strength, of surviving, of finding love where no one expected it. And how, even through it all, I chose to carry on. I didn't become bitter. I became whole. I gave the letters to Hannah on a Saturday afternoon. She read each one slowly, as if touching a relic. She cried. She smiled. And when she finished, she said, "You are so much more than they told you you were." That disarmed me, because it was true. For years, they made me believe I was trouble. Today, I knew I was a survivor. And that being sensitive, silent, observant, was never weakness. It was resilience. These letters became routine, a ritual. Every week, a new one. Sometimes I'd talk about a present, a movie I'd seen, a dish I'd tried. Other times I'd simply write, "Thank you for not giving up on me." And every thank you I gave her, I also gave to myself, because keeping my heart open after everything I'd been through was also an act of courage. One day, Hannah responded with something that resonated with me. Love is not measured by how long you're there, but by how long you choose to stay. I reread that phrase for days. I clung to it like an anchor, and I understood. What we were building wasn't compensation. It was a new story, one that began with truth, and that no abandonment could erase. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole with someone. You didn't have to explain me, or hide me. Hannah saw me completely, with everything I was, everything I am, everything I lacked. And still, I chose to stay. And that, to me, was worth more than any blood, any surname, any obligation. A month later, I received an unexpected call. It was my adoptive mother. She hadn't called since the note. I answered with a heavy heart. "Can we talk?" she asked. We met in a park, late in the afternoon. When I arrived, she was already sitting on a bench, head down, holding something in her lap. It was a box. "This is yours," she said. She handed it to me without looking me in the eye. And then, for the first time, she began to speak. She told me she'd known my origins from the beginning, that she'd promised to take care of me, but over time it turned to bitterness, because I thought I'd never be enough for you. And deep down, I felt like a replacement. Her words came out through tears, so I pulled away. I shut myself down. I was harsh. I was cruel. I remained silent, not out of coldness, but because I was hearing something I'd been waiting for my whole life. Recognition. She continued. She said she'd always known the day of truth would come, and that she'd called me dead weight not out of contempt, but out of desperation. I watched you grow, drift away, and I felt useless. That hurt, because in a way, I understood. But it also hurt because she'd never told me any of this before. Only now, after everything had come to light. Only now that another woman had given me the love she'd refused. I opened the box right then and there. Inside were photos of me, letters I'd written when I was little, drawings, a baby tooth, a hair ribbon. She hadn't thrown anything away. She'd kept everything, silently, in secret. And in that moment I saw she loved me, in her own way, a crooked, hard, flawed way, but love nonetheless. I never knew how to be a mother, but I tried with everything I had, she said, her eyes red. I stood there, not saying much, but I reached out my hand. She took it, and that was a silent agreement, not of complete reconciliation, but of acknowledgement, that despite everything, there were good parts, and that the end didn't have to be with hatred. Sometimes, just respect is enough, and maybe now, with time, we could transform the silence into something lighter. On the way home, I thought about how much life changes when we choose to face the truth, not with anger, but with firmness, not with shouting, but with clarity. And that late afternoon I understood, sometimes the most healing apology is the one that comes when you've learned to live without it, because then, it's no longer a necessity. It's just justice. It was Sunday night when I finished writing my last letter. The lamplight made everything feel calm, almost sacred. The blank slate seemed to stare back at me, waiting for what was to come. I picked up my pen and began. This is the last letter I need to write, because now I've listened to myself. The words came simply, without pain, without haste. It was different from the previous ones. There was peace in them. In the letter, I didn't talk about wounds. I talked about achievements, about waking up without guilt, about laughing without burden, about knowing I wasn't a mistake, but rather an interrupted story that now continued with new pages. I thanked Hannah for waiting for me, and my adoptive mother for acknowledging her mistake. Forgiving isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to poison yourself with what never comes back. I carefully folded the paper and placed it in the same box that held Hannah's letters. That box now symbolized everything that had rebuilt me. The pain, the reunion, the love, the doubt, the forgiveness, and above all, the choice. Because no one wrote my ending. I did. I rewrote it. And now, for the first time, I no longer needed proof. I was enough for myself. The next morning, I handed the box to Hannah. She didn't ask any questions. She simply held it with the same care she would hold a baby. "Thank you for giving me back my right to exist," I said. She cried and hugged me again. A hug without guilt, without fear, only affection, only presence. And in that moment, everything that had once seemed broken finally felt whole. I walked home with light steps. My adoptive parents were in the living room. I said little. They did too. But now the silence was respectful. It wasn't discomfort. It was space. And I knew. It wasn't my mission to fix anyone. I fixed myself, and that was enough. The wound that had called me dead weight had healed. And now, it was just another line in my story. Strong and true. Before I went to sleep, I looked in the mirror and repeated, "You belong." That was it. Belonging. Not to a name, not to an address, but to myself, to my body, to my voice, to my truth. And no one would ever take that away from me again. Months later, I sat with Hannah at an event for the NGO she founded. She introduced me as my son. Simple as that. No footnotes, no excuses. And when people came up to hug me, they said, "We already know you." She was talking about you, even though she didn't know if she would ever meet you. That pierced me, because now I existed publicly, without shame, without needing to be hidden. I participated in a conversation circle. I told my story. I spoke of the day I was called dead weight, the scream that changed everything, the journey, the box, the two mothers, the forgiveness, the love that survived despite everything. When I finished, a 15-year-old girl hugged me and said, "I was adopted too, and you gave me courage." That was the perfect ending. Not for history, but for the cycle of pain. Because the story continues. Every day, in the letters I still write, in the conversations I still have, in the silences that no longer crush me, I learned that the truth doesn't destroy, lies do, and that no matter how long it takes, you have the right to know your origins and to rewrite your life. Today, I don't carry grudges. I carry memories, because forgetting isn't necessary. What I lived through shaped me, prepared me, taught me that pain doesn't define me, but how I transform that pain into strength does. And now, I walk with my head held high, because I know who I am. And I know that I was indeed desired. It just took them a while to tell me. If you've made it this far, subscribe to the channel now. Share this story on WhatsApp with someone who needs to hear it. And comment here where you're listening from. I promise I'll read every comment with an open heart. Thank you for being with me until the end.